Hi, I'm Robert Joseph. Today I'm going to teach you how to make this strappy jockstrap. So first, let's actually talk about the pattern. So this is the pattern. It is free, and only you know where to find it because you're watching this on YouTube. So basically, you're going to go to my website, sewitLikeAman.com, look for the free patterns link in the navigation menu at the top. And it will be listed there as Strappy Jockstrap. And of course, the link to the download will be available. Also, the link will be available down in the description below. So a couple of things to know about this is the only pattern piece. You're going to need a bunch of elastic, and I'm using 1-inch wide elastic. You can use any width you want, but just be aware that where it attaches to the front pouch, at the bottom, and I go into this in the video, that you may need to increase or decrease that width. The other thing is that there are measurements here, down here, which talk about the finished waist measurement. And you're going to need to know what that finished waist measurement is. It's different than the actual elastic cut amount that I give you for my previous patterns, but I walk you through that in this video as well. So you have all of the measurements here. It's going to take about 1/3 yard of fabric, and I know that seems like kind of a weird amount of yardage, but the way that this pattern is set up for the height here, and also for cutting on the greatest stretch, all of the sizes go over just a little bit more than 1/4 yard. So it's actually 1/3 yard. Now understand that when you buy fabric, you buy yardage at the height of the fabric. So, and this is the height of the pattern piece. So you will need to buy it in 1/4 yard increments. Some places will actually sell you 1/3 yard, which is fine. That's enough to make any of the sizes here. But if you buy 1/2 yard, you're actually going to be able to make quite a few of these because this is the only pattern piece and you're going to need to cut 2. Now you have the option of lining this, and in the video I line it. So I line it with a much lighter weight jersey knit than actually the outside. So just be aware of that if you want to line it or not. The other thing is I give a bunch of sizes here like I have for all of my regular patterns. The only thing that actually in this one that really changes the size or the way it's worn is the elastic. And that's one thing that you will need to play around with. I give you the basic sizes for the total width of the elastic that goes all the way around the waist as my usual width amount for underwear or swimwear. But if you need a little bit more or less around the waist area or a little more or less around the leg area, I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to figure that on your own because it's really hard for me to tell you how much you're going to need. The unique part of this particular pattern is that this elastic piece is one long piece. The only place it's cut is at the beginning and the end. So if I turn this around, and forgive the some of the scratches on my mannequin here, there's no seam here and there are no seams in the leg elastic here except for where it attaches at the bottom of the pouch. So it's one long piece of elastic. So just be aware of that. And I give you the total elastic amounts here on the pattern, as well as the yardage in the information on the pattern. So just be aware of that. This is probably not a beginner pattern, although it just has the one single pattern, but the way you put it together is probably not a beginner process. So just be aware that if you're new to sewing, this may take a little bit of trying and trying and trying again to get it right. Once we get to the elastic parts, it's actually a little bit confusing and complicated, but if you hang in there and you understand how things move around the body, then you should be okay. So I'm sorry this was a really long introduction, but I wanted to give you the information about making this particular style of jockstrap. And of course, again, this is free. So just go to the website or use the link below. This is not for sale. Please don't ask me where you can find it because you can find it on my website, sewitLikeAman.com. Just go there, you'll find all of my patterns. The other thing is This colored elastic that I use, I bought at Joann's, but just look out there use Google search to find different types of elastic. I'm sure you'll find a lot of them. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. It helps me out a lot. And that way you will find out whenever I release a new pattern like this. So with that, let's get to making this sexy, strappy jockstrap. Okay, so I'm ready to get started on this strappy jockstrap. And let's just talk about the pattern really quickly. Let's see if the camera will focus. So now for the fabric, I say to cut to self, and that's for the left and the right. If you choose to line it, you'll need to cut two of the lining. And I'm going to line this jockstrap today. So this printed fabric, which is kind of a multicolored snake skin print. It's actually a jersey knit. Both of these are jersey knit. This is a white, lightweight jersey knit. You can kind of almost see through it. So this is just going to go for the lining of this, and that's just to enclose that center seam. So one thing that looks a little bit different on my pattern than your pattern is that on my pattern, I forgot to draw in the grain line here. So yours has this grain line, horizontal grain line, and it says greatest stretch. So what I mean by the greatest stretch is the width of the fabric. So let me find an edge here. I've cut this on this before. Here we go. So this is a selvage edge, and you can usually find the selvage. Sometimes it will have little holes in it. The width between those two selvage edges is the stretch. It's usually the greatest stretch. And so you want to make sure that that is going along the greatest stretch. So the other thing is I've just kind of drawn on, yours is more perfect than mine, but also I have 1/4 inch seam allowances around here on the outside pouch curve, and then a 1/4 inch seam here at where the leg strap elastic will be joining. And then there is elastic along the outer edge of the jockstrap, and I use 3/8 inch wide elastic. And today I'm going to be using rubber elastic, which is usually used for swimwear. I've run out of my other swimwear braided elastic, which is cotton covered rubber elastic. So whatever elastic you choose to use on this side area, know that I got 3/8 inch wide. You could use 1/4 inch if you would like, but just remember that that will actually increase the width of your jockstrap. So the other thing that I'm going to be using today is this elastic here. And this is knitted elastic. You could use braided as well. But if you use braided elastic, know that that will be a little bit thicker. So this is a nice kind of a fashion elastic. I get this at Joann's, and it comes in a lot of different colors, pinks and purples, and I thought this blue would go well with this. So you're going to need quite a bit of the elastic because this is a no seam waistband and leg strap. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It crisscrosses in the center. So just refer to the pattern for suggested measurements of the elastic to be cut. So make sure that when you're purchasing, if you're purchasing it by the yard, that you're actually purchasing enough. And that is actually one of the things that you'll need to actually guesstimate yourself if you want to change the tightness of the leg straps or the waist, okay? And I'll talk more about that once we get to this elastic part. So I'm going to actually just get this all laid out and cut, and that's the part where I usually, there's no sound, and I just speed it up. Okay, so now that I have the two pieces cut, I'm going to set the pattern aside. And I need to put face sides together, or some people like to say right side. I don't like to say right side because there is a right and a left side to every garment. And so if you say face side, that means the printed side or the side of the fabric that you want to show on the outside of the garment. So I'm just going to match these to the face side. All right. And yes, knit has a mind of its own. And I'm just going to really kind of worry about this outside seam here, making sure that everything lines up on that outside seam, because that's where we're going to stitch. And they're a little bit off. Okay, so that's close enough right now. I can fix it while I'm in the machine. And then I want to make sure that my face sides on my lining are also matching. So there's one, and then two. And this notch here that I clipped out helps me just to make sure that I'm kind of centering everything before I actually go into the curve. And once I've got everything lined up here, pretty good. Sometimes your fabric will stretch as well, kind of sometimes when you're cutting. So you just want to be careful about that on knits. And then my suggestion is not to cut everything out and then wait for until the next day to sew, because you may have stretched out the fabric and then you go to sew it the next day and it's actually smaller because it has recovered that stretch that was stretched out. So I know that sounds kind of backward, but you really don't want to be cutting your knits out one day and then sewing them together a couple of days down the road. So, and if you're making larger garments and you're making a lot, when you lay out your fabric, you actually really, for knits, you really kind of want to let it relax for at least a half hour after you lay it out before you cut it. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and pin this. I think I'm sewing this way in the machine, so I will start here. And this end is where the elastic is going to be attached, but we're going to sew from here all the way around this edge. So I'm just going to put some pins here. I don't normally pin when I'm actually doing my own sewing, but I want you to see where along that I'm sewing. And as I'm finishing this up, remember this is a free pattern, so only the YouTubers know where to get this pattern, so I'm not advertising it anywhere else. It is on my Shopify site under free patterns, but you have the link down below just as a reminder. So the reason it's free is because this is actually the only pattern piece and the rest of it is just elastic. So I thought that would be a nice offer for you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. You'll find out when new patterns are released. That's the best way. Okay, so I'm all pinned here. I'm gonna sew from here all the way around using my overlock machine. Now I'm using a double needle 4 thread to sew this with. If you want to sew it with a regular zigzag stitch, go ahead. I don't actually promote that, but you can. You just have to remember that you only have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to want to use a narrow and short zigzag, and you're going to need to stretch a little as you sew. So if that's the way you want to do it, you can do it that way, but the appearance may not be as nice as using an overlock machine. So I'm going to move over to the overlock and get this sewn up. Okay, I've got that seam sewn, and actually I'm going to back up for just 1 second. I didn't realize that I didn't mention this. Now, I had mentioned that the lining I had matched a face side to face side, and then the fashion fabric or printed fabric face side to face side. What I didn't say is to stack them on top of each other as you saw me do. So you're going to need to stack your fashion fabric, your lining fabric on top of each other, and then you'll sew this seam around the outer curve. And that the next step is actually so it's just this seam, and then the next step with the elastic, the leg opening, well, it's not really the leg opening elastic, it's the outer edge of this pouch where we're going to be putting that elastic. And I'm going to grab that elastic right now, and I'll talk a little more. I will grab that elastic and talk a little bit more about it in just a sec. Okay, so I forgot that I had put this away instead of leaving it out. So I have this rubber elastic, and what it is it stretches just like regular elastic, but the thing is that if you accidentally cut it, it's not going to unravel. The unfortunate thing about this particular rubber elastic is that if you're doing a lot of swimming in chlorine or in the ocean, the sea salt, it will degrade and deteriorate this elastic pretty quickly. So you have to keep replacing it. But since this isn't really something that's going to be seeing a lot of the water all the time, it's okay. But of course you can use a braided elastic, a 1/4 inch or 3/8 will be fine. So that's what I'm going to be using here. And there's really no specific length on this. You won't really need to be stretching it a whole lot, because as you're sewing it onto the outer edge of the pouch here, the machine will actually be stretching it as you go. But around here, we probably don't want to stretch too much, because then it will cut into the body. But as we come out of that curve, we'll probably just want to stretch it a little bit and then go back to no stretching it up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the pouch face side out. So I have the face side, and then make sure that your lining fabrics are also on their face side. And that's just so we hide this seam on the inside. Okay, so I'm going to do something to this, and that means switching out my machines really quickly. Is what will help me a little bit is if I baste tack the lining and the fashion fabric together about a 1/4 inch in from that edge. And that will keep everything together for when I'm attaching this elastic, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do right now. You'll see me do that at the machine. And then we'll come back here and we'll talk a little bit more about this elastic. Okay, so I'm just going to get this in here, and I'm doing it kind of as, I'm going to baste the lining to the fashion fabric, and I'm using a fairly long stitch, not totally the longest stitch, but I just want to make sure everything stays together. And then after you get the elastic in, if you feel like it's too tight, you can always break those threads, these basting threads. And I'm going kind of slow, because the faster you go when you're using a regular sewing machine is that you will end up stretching. So I'm trying not to go too fast as I sew, so that I'm not really stretching the knit out. And there's no need to backstitch at the beginning or the end. And see, it actually stretched out. It's okay, it's just a little bit, but this is what I mean, is that it stretched out a little bit here, okay? And I think I'll do it on this side, going from the bottom again. Just try to make sure that you have all your edges together. And of course, we're going to be putting elastic on this edge too. I'm going to do that with the overlock machine, but you can apply the elastic again with a zigzag stitch if you would like. Okay, so we have attached the lining to the outside of the pouch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach actually this elastic. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to put the elastic down by the feed dogs, and then I'm going to put the pouch on top of the elastic, and then feed it through the overlock this way. And what that will do is that will help me kind of guide the edge of this pouch along the edge of the elastic, because we really don't want to be cutting the elastic at all. If you Some people like to do the elastic on top, but I feel like sometimes that it actually takes up too much of the garment. The feed dogs will actually gather the fabric instead. So if I put the elastic on the bottom, I have a little bit more control over how much stretch I put into the elastic. And right here, if you're looking down here at the bottom part, I try not to stretch it right around this curved area. Rather, once I get out of that curve, then I'll probably stretch a little bit right in here. I'll just tug on it a little bit more. And when you stretch it, you're not really stretching it out. You're just kind of tugging on it a little bit. And that's really enough stretch. Now, the way this is going to be worn, it's not, we don't have a whole leg opening here that we need to actually stretch evenly around, except around the rear end. So we don't really need a lot of stretch. We just want to need to make sure that this part of the garment is not being stretched out. And so when we tug on the elastic just a tiny bit, it helps it keep its shape. So I'm going to go do this right now. Okay, so this is actually kind of challenging to do when I have a camera right in front of me. So the camera is literally right in front of the machine where I need to sew. So we'll see how this goes in. So see, I'm putting the garment right on top of the elastic, and then I have a little bit of a lip here of the elastic sticking out, and that's so the machine can grab the elastic, and I'm pushed it all the way up there. I'm going to release the presser foot down, and then we'll just sew a little bit. And this is where I usually take out the sound on the video because my overlock is kind of loud. So just watch, and usually if it goes okay, then I will speed this section up, at least for the second part. And see, that didn't go off right away. So what happened was it didn't take the fabric underneath here. So I can lift my presser foot up, and it's got the elastic in the needle, so I'm just going to push the fabric up there and presser foot down. Now it looks here like I'm stretching it, but I'm not. I'm just kind of bending that edge to match the elastic edge. And now I'm out of that curved area, so I'm just going to take my elastic and I'm just going to tug on it a little bit. A little tug. And it will go through. Sometimes you may need to help it back here to pull it from the back as well. Hold on to this, tugging it a little bit. I'm just going to hold on to that, but I'm going to help it through. So you'll have to use your fingers. And I'm going to do one more tug, help it through, and then I'm not going to tug at all because this is the very top. And then I'll pull it out. And I'm going to leave this long. It'll help me once I turn it a little bit. You see, I was tugging on it, it didn't pull through, so that's why I have a lot of tiny stitches here. So sometimes you'll have to help it through by pulling it from the back. So I'm going to do this other side, and I'm going to just let you watch. Okay, so that is it for adding the elastic onto the garment. And you can see actually on this side better where I'm actually stretching it here on either of those sides. It's fairly even. So now what we need to do is we need to actually turn the elastic over and stitch it down. And we're going to do that with our regular sewing machine with a zigzag stitch. And when you fold this, you want to fold it here at the edge of that elastic on the inside right there. Make sure it's nice and flush. And then when we zigzag, we're going to put the needle just right down here on the edge of where the overlocking is, and then one zigzag will be over on the elastic side, and then the needle will come here to the fabric side and then back over. And I'm going to be using a shorter and narrower zigzag stitch. I need to get into the machine. I will tell you at the machine what I'm using. The wider the zigzag stitch, the more chances I believe you have of skip stitches, and make sure you're using the right needle. So I think I'm going to use it sharp, even though with a knit you generally want to use a ballpoint. But because I've got the elastic on here, I want to make sure that that stitches through the elastic nicely. The other thing that I'm going to be using is that I'm going to be using embroidery thread, and that's what I use to sew the lining and the garment together. So that's not something that I normally sew garments with, but I use it because it's nice and shiny, and it's actually pretty strong. It's 100% polyester, and it actually will make a nice, pretty stitch here on the outside of the garment. So I'll let you know what my zigzag width is when I'm over at the machine. Okay, so I'm ready to do this zigzagging, and I have my zigzag set at 3 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters long. So the way I need to do this is I just need to fold this over so it's nice and flush against that edge. And it's going to be a little bit hard to get this started, especially with a camera. Now, if you are at home, of course, you won't have a camera in front of you, but you can reach around here to help you kind of get this pulled going. So I'm just going to get this kind of started in here, get this needle down. And that's not going to be really where I want the needle, but it'll work for right now. So now I'm not going to really stretch in the beginning. And I don't really need to backstitch at the beginning here because we're gonna be putting a seam here down here. So I'm just gonna kind of get this started. Okay, the needle is down. Now I'm gonna actually just kind of stretch here and get this rolled over nicely. So I make sure that none of this lining is getting puckered or anything. And if you can watch the needle for a minute, I want the needle to just come here to the edge of that elastic, and I'm probably going to have to kind of help it through here with this hand a little bit until I have something back here at the back to kind of pull on. Because if I'm stretching this elastic, and what we'll need to do is stretch that elastic to fit it back in to where it was all stretched out. So we're going to have to help it from the back. And you'll just have to do that as you go along, folding it over. So you really have to use your hands in a lot of different ways. And I don't really need to backstitch at the end either. So this is what the stitching looks like on the outside. So that looks pretty nice. So I'm going to go ahead and do this other side. That's done. Fold it over and then under there nicely. So there's really no stretching up here at the top, but once we come around here, there will be. So we just kind of need to get prepared to do that. And I probably could have used a slightly wider stitch, but that's all right. at least as long as you're getting a good amount of that elastic folded edge in the stitch, you will be fine. Having a little trouble here. All right, and there's the other edge. All right, so let's go back over to the table. Okay, so we've got our elastic all on there, and I'm just going to clean up these edges by clipping off these threads here and this extra elastic on these edges. Just get that cleaned up. Okay. And I don't like these threads sticking out. I'm just going to clean those up. So clean your threads as you go. It will actually save you time at the end. Okay, so there's one thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it on camera, is at this top edge here, I'm going to clean this top edge up here. I'm going to run it through the overlock really quick, because we're not going to be, like if you watch some of my other underwear videos, I actually put the elastic on and then I go back in and I trim the excess off. This time we're actually going to keep this excess fabric. There's not going to be a lot of it, and it's going to be zigzagged down to the elastic. So I'm going to overlock this edge. If you don't have an overlock machine, you can zigzag the edge, and that's fine. This edge here where we're going to attach the leg strap elastic, we're going to leave that alone for right now, and once we get the elastic sewn there, then I'll run it through the overlock machine. And that will probably be the last step in this. So before I start working on the elastic, I'm just going to run this through the overlock right up here just to clean finish that edge. Okay, so I have overlocked the top edge of here. Now when you do this, should be at an angle, and you need that angle. So don't try to straighten it out, okay? So that angle is very important. So what I did is I overlocked it, and then I folded the overlocking back to the back side, and then I tacked it down. So if you've watched any of my other videos, I like to do that. I like to keep things as clean as possible and tack down. Now if you were to just cut the overlocking here at the edge, it would unravel and then it would not be pretty. So that's like I like to fold over the extra overlocking thread and tack it down. So now we're actually going to be moving on to this elastic. And I call this the no seam elastic waist and leg straps because there's no actual seam in it. The only seam that is going to be done is sewing the elastic down here to the bottom of the pouch, and we're not there yet. So it does seem like there's a lot of elastic, and that's because it's wrapping around from the back, and it's going to be coming around the front and then wrapping around your legs for those straps. So I have pre-cut my piece, so refer to your pattern. I have a couple different measurements on there. So I have pre-cut it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to mark where that half is. Now this half mark is actually going to be your center back. Okay, so that's the first mark. Then the second mark, keep it folded, it'll make things a little bit easier. From that mark, you're going to measure from that mark, and I don't know, maybe you can see it on my table here. Whoops, no, I can do it, I'll have to do it up here. From this edge, right, from the folded edge, you will measure from there half of your finished waist measurement. So in elastics for working with waistbands, your finished elastic or finished garment width is actually going to be smaller than your actual measurement or waist measurement. So for instance, this is a medium. So I tell you to cut the waist elastic on most of my things at 32 inches. And then we actually sew that elastic together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So 32 inches, a 1/2 inch on each side. So that's one total inch that's taken away. So 32 minus 1 is 31. So I have to measure from here half of that 31, which is 15 and a half. Right? So, and I'm going to put a pin on either side of that elastic. So there's the one side, and then I can flip it over and just put a pin on the other side. And I'm reaching all the way across the table. So I'll pull this closer to myself and redo those pins. Okay, so I'm just going to redo this, hold this with my thumb. So now this measurement now, 15 and a half, is actually going to be the center front. If I pull this out, can you see the whole thing there in the frame if I go like that? So these two pins here at the ends are actually going to be your center front, because we're going to wrap these around and match them to the front, okay? So we're going to do that right now. So I've got my center back. Also, I have the measurement, the finished measurements of what you should be measuring out. So I give you the full finished waist measurement, and then in parentheses, there will be the half measurement from your center back, okay? So, and I know this is kind of confusing, so watch the video a couple times, watch me do it. Now, you can adjust those measurements for your liking, but that's something you will have to work out for yourself, okay? As well as the leg straps once we get there. So now I'm actually going to bring in the pouch, and we're going to be working here at the center front, and I'm going to, hopefully I can do this without too much trouble to show you. I'm going to need those pins. Okay, so let me just put the full elastic out here. Okay, so you can see it. So I'm working here. So this is my center back, and I want to make sure that I'm working with the elastic so I don't get any twists in it. So this is the center back. Pretend this is coming around your backside, and then you're going to be rolling this around to the front side, and I'm going to pull this over, and I need to match that pin to the center front. Now when I match this at the center front, this is the center front, but I want to be matching it along the angle of the garment. So I'm going to match that up there, but I'm just going to tilt it to match it, and you can cover this edge just a little bit. It's not going to really take away from the length of your garment. So I'm going to pin that. So this is the center front, and I'm just going to lift this up here because I'm going to get this pinned all the way through the garment and the elastic. Okay, and then continue that angle, and I'll put a pin down here. It's going to be easier if I pin it this way. It doesn't matter because we can take the pins out when we're in the machine. Okay, so now again, this is the center back, and I'm wrapping around so everything is nice and flat and going the correct way as if I were wearing it. So now I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to follow this around, and then I'm going to lay this one at the center front right on top of the other one, following this angle. And I'm going to lay this on the center front there, angling it there. This is my center, and if it helps you, let me get this light here. The crisscross center happens right here at that seam, right there, okay? So then I'm going to take this and I'm going to pin this and get through the elastic, and then follow this angle. It's hard to see. Move that, follow that angle, feel under here, and then let me see, it's off a little bit. Okay, there we go. Trying to keep those centers together, and then I'm going to make a couple other pins, and I know I've got a lot of pins going. Okay. So now we'll have to remove these pins as we go. So now this is the center back. Everything is rolling around here. Think about this if it were on against your body, and I'll kind of hold this up so you can kind of see the center. Your body would go inside here, and then everything wraps around and it's not being twisted. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get in the machine, the sewing machine. I'm going to actually pin across here, right there. So you'll need to decide which side you sew on first. The left side, so I've wrapped the left over the right. And I'm going to zigzag from this edge all the way up to the top of this elastic. And we'll backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so all the way, and then we'll stop. Then we'll start here and we'll zigzag all the way up to the top of this elastic here. Okay, and that will be the extent of the sewing onto the elastic. All right, so let's go into the machine and get that done. Okay, so we're in the machine here, and I'm actually just going to make sure that all of the other elastic pieces are out of the way, and I only have the garment and the elastic part that I need to sew. Now we're going to have to remove these pins as we go, and I'm going to just kind of put my needle down here, and I'm going to use a zigzag stitch, the same zigzag stitch I used here for the edge of the elastic, and it's 3, let me actually get my machine set up here. I think it was 3 wide and 2.5 long. If that's different, I apologize. That's what I'm going to do now. Whoops, sorry about that. Camera move. I'm going to get my needle down here. Now I'm going to probably stitch a couple stitches and then back stitch. Now there's really no stretching that's going on here. And then back stitch. I'm going to remove this, sorry for my hands. Remove those pins. There's really no stretching going on. What it looks like I'm stretching, I'm actually just flattening everything out. And then because of these pins are creating some bulkiness. So I'm going to have to remove this pin and this under pin. Make sure that doesn't move. And then I'm going to keep sewing. And my needle is coming right here to the edge of the elastic. Not over it, but just to it. And now this part is really thick, so you may have to help your machine over it a little bit. And then I'm going to remove this pin. And right up here, we want to end at the edge of this elastic here. So I'm going to get ready to backstitch. And my backstitch button is on the front of my machine, so it's kind of difficult with the camera. So that's why I'm going slow. And now I'm going to backstitch, I think. And let's pull out and see what that looks like. And it looks like I skipped a stitch here. I don't know why that happened. So maybe I'll go over it again after I get this other side done, just to hide that a little bit. So I'm going to come back in here, get this all underneath the machine like I had it before. Try not to distort that angle. And I'm going to come in it from this side. I'm going to get that needle down in place. And I'll pull this pin out. Now we're coming back up on this other side. Grab this pin. Now I took the pins out up here, so I'm going to have to make sure that I'm still doing a straight line. With that elastic and making sure everything is flat. And I'm going to get ready to backstitch. So let's see how This one came out. This one, okay, no skip stitches on this side. So maybe I can just go back and just kind of start here. It looks like something happened here. I'm just going to go back and start here, get back in those original stitches and stitch over that to see if I can hide that a little bit. And then I'll be back over at the table. Okay, so I have finished with the stitching the elastic on in the front, and I actually went over that part that I said that I had to skip stitch, and I just kind of went over it just in that area. Now if this were for sale or for a customer, I probably would have ripped that entire thing out and just done it over again, or just done double stitching all the way across on both so it looked you know, the same. So now we've got, this is our waist. Okay, and it comes around the front. So now we have to do these leg straps. And I'm going to turn this over so we see the inside. So turn it over like this. Okay, and this is our the bottom of the pouch where we're going to sew our leg straps to. And we need to make sure that we're actually sewing them so they're not, you know, twisted in any way. So that means that you've got to follow the elastic and pretend it's on your body, and you're putting this up here, and you're going to sew this on like this to this side, and then you're going to fold it up. Okay? Now, if I do it like this, I've got a twist in it. It doesn't move around. So this is what I suggest you do, is that you test this out, hold it. If I flip this over this way on the other side, because we're going to fold this over and stitch it down. Now it comes around and I still got a twist in it. So I need to actually figure out where that twist is happening. And get it switched over. I don't know if that did it. I may have just doubled it over. This is hard to do upside down and backwards. Okay, so there it is. So you need to make sure that it kind of comes around and there's no twisting in it. So I'll just double check that. If you can do it gently, pin it or clip it somehow and then try it on to make sure there's no twisting. Now, there's another little issue. The way I prefer to sew this on is to do this. Take your two straps and lay it out like this. And the reason I'm doing it upside down is so that you're seeing it the way you're actually working with it on your table. So here are the straps. They're all going the same way. Overlap them on top of each other and create this L shape. So you're piecing them together so it creates like an L, okay? So if you put them together like this, come together and then angle them toward yourself until it creates this little L shape or a diamond shape. And I'm going to pin these together going from this corner over to this corner, okay? Because that's actually, we're going to sew these together. Now that we have that sewn, that's pinned together. So I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to make sure that when I sew this together, because we're going to sew it onto the bottom here all together, and then we're going to turn that up to the inside, and we want to make sure that this is all going the right way without any twists. And this way it has twists. Okay, so that means that I can put this elastic back out, and I'm probably just really kind of confusing you as to why are you doing this way. It's because you're going to have to figure this out on your own. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put this against here. Actually, I'm going to flip it up so this corner piece should go up toward the inside. And then if I pin this all together, I'm going to stitch this all together, and then I'm going to turn it up to the inside, making sure that I don't have any twists. And I still have a twist on this side. I don't have a twist on, do I have a twist on this side? Yes, I do. So that means I need to change it. So I need to flip this one this way. And flip this one this way. to get it sewn in this way. And then folding it to the inside. And there I don't have any twisting going on. So the reason I keep this in the videos is so that you can see that I still have to work these things out too, and that there's no way for me to teach you, oh, you just flip it this way and do it and it's right. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of work. So now I'm gonna unpin this from the garment, and what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pin this together, because this is the way it needs to go on the garment. I'm actually going to stitch the cross here using a straight stitch from this corner to this corner, and that's going to be my stitch line for when I stitch it onto the garment. So I'm going to stitch that together right now, and that way the elastics won't go anywhere. Okay, so again, I'm going to stitch here. Let me see if I can get this in the camera right. Okay, so right up here, this corner, down to this corner, where the under elastic corner is. So I'm just going to get this in here. I'll put my needle in. And that will actually also be the stitch line for when we stitch it to the garment. Okay. It's right here. And I'm just kind of going slow so you can see it. Okay. Okay, so that's stitched right across diagonally. So let's go put it to the garment. Okay, so we have the elastic stitched together, right? And now we just need to actually double check, make sure we're going to get this sewn together. So this point, the point of the elastic goes toward the cut edge here. Okay, so you'll need to double check again that you don't have any twists. So now I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on here. So this is basically my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to line up my stitching on that 1/4 inch seam allowance, because that's where I'm going to stitch it together. So I'm going to pin this there, and then I'm going to do my folding. Once I get this stitched, I'm actually going to fold this seam up to the inside, and then I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to do this all at the machine, and then I'm going to stitch across here just to keep everything down. Okay, so now that I have that done, I need to make sure that I don't have any twists. Look at that, I have a twist. So I didn't actually get that on there right. I know it's stitched together right, but I need to fold this end a different way. So let's fold it up this way, match that 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to pin this all together again. And I do this every time. Fold the seam up to the inside and then double check, and I don't have any twists on this side, and I don't have any twists on this side. So this is the way I need to sew it on. So I'm actually going to, because I want to put it in the machine this way, I'm going to reverse that pin. Make sure everything is even. Okay. It's okay if your garment is a little bit wider than the elastic. Okay, so I'm going to stitch right on top of my stitching, right across here. Okay, so I don't know about your sewing machine, but my sewing machine doesn't really like a whole lot of thicknesses. So even though it's a newer machine, I know exactly where I need to sew this. So I'm going to take that pin out. So what I like to do in this instance is I will kind of reposition this again on that 1/4 inch. Make sure everything is fairly straight. I'm going to start here in the center here, if I can get this pushed under here. And the reason I like to do that is because I'm going to start this, I'm going to redo that 1/4 inch seam. Okay, and then get this under here. I'm going to start at about the middle, right on top of that stitching I did to the elastic. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because it may not backstitch properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all the way to the end, put the needle down, and then I'm going to lift the presser foot, and then I'm going to turn the entire garment around and then stitch back. Because I don't want to take the chance that it just won't like to backstitch. So that's how I'm going to do this seam. So I'm going to stitch. I can go one more, I think. And then I'm going to lift my presser foot, turn this all the way around. Be careful not to pull it out of alignment, right? And I do this a lot with bulky items that I'm sewing. So I'm going to put this, and because it's stitched here, it's already pushed all of that fabric down. Sorry about my hand. It's actually pushed a lot of that fabric down and flattened it. So now it shouldn't have a problem going in and stitching all the way to the other side. And I'm going to actually pivot on this side as well. And I'm going slow because I don't want to miss that corner there. And just turn this all around. Press our foot down and go through, and I'm going to finish just past the center. Okay, so that's my stitch line, and now I'm going to turn this over and do top stitching. All right, so before I do that though, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip this edge of the elastic, and I'll do that. I'll show you what I'm doing. This other part is okay, it won't really unravel. So I'm going to clip that to the same height as this edge, and I'm not going to show this on camera, but because I just have to switch out a machine to do that. I'm just going to overlock this edge, and then I'll come back. I'm going to tuck the overlocking underneath to the back side, and then I'll come back and I'll do the top stitching on the garment, okay? Okay, so I have this overlocked now, and all I need to do, what I like to do is turn the extra overlocking, keep a, 3/8 of an inch or more there. I'm folding it over, let me see, to the inside, the wrong side, right? And then I'm going to fold that down. I'm going to kind of finger press this kind of hard, and then I'm going to fold this over to the front, get everything underneath the presser foot. Sorry about my hands. And this top stitching is going to hold everything on the inside. And again, I'm going to start in the center here, about the middle of it, because of the back stitching. And let's see if I can, sometimes you can lift your presser foot up a little bit higher. I'm going to go just shy of 1/4 inch because I want to make sure that I'm grabbing that seam to hold it down. All right, and so I'm going to stitch slow. I think I'll go one more stitch and then presser foot up, turn everything around. Seems like a lot of work, but I'm telling you, if you have a hard time backstitching with your thicknesses, this usually does the trick. So then I'm going to sew, kind of pushing it, helping it through a little bit. My industrial machine doesn't have a problem at all, but this is a home machine, so it's not really designed for thicknesses. So all the way up, a couple more stitches. There we go. And then I'm going to turn it one more time, and then I'm just going to go back over to the center. Oh, it didn't really like that. That's all right. We got it. Nobody's going to see that part anyway, right? All right. That came out okay. Now I just need to clip those threads. Well, that didn't. Well, part of it got in there, but I'm going to tuck this underneath there. Maybe it shouldn't fray off. That'll be okay. Okay, so there is your Strappy Jockstrap with a no seam elastic waist and leg straps, because the leg straps just go here at the bottom. So there you are. I'm not going to model it for you. I'm not sure you'd want to see that. So I will put it on my mannequin for the pictures. One little note is up here. Let's have a look at the inside really quick. is that the reason we don't really need to cut this off is because it would be kind of jagged. It wouldn't work. So I just left this in here. Now these corners here are loose. So what you could do is just topically here where they are is just do a tack stitch, and I may do that off camera. So you could just tack it up there, and that would just give you a little bit more security instead of having this kind of flailing around in there. So that's really the only other thing. To get creative with this, with different types of elastic. One final note about the elastic width here. So when I cross these over using the 1-inch elastic, it actually measures just shy of about 1.5 inches, and that's what really the width of the bottom is here. So if you choose to use more narrow elastic, you'll have a little extra on the sides here. You could just kind of trim that off of the pattern if you want. If you use wider elastic, be aware that that's going to need wider amounts down here to fit that in. So just be aware of that, all right? Now you don't have to do the elastic the way I've done it here, crisscrossing it. You could just put it in here straight, so they're going straight like that. It's totally up to you, but I like to have that angle. I think it fits better this way, but that's up to you. You know, different people have different ways of their preferences for wearing their garments. So there you are. And this is the end of the tutorial. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and the alert button, and you will find out whenever I upload new videos and new patterns. So this is the first place that I post when I actually have a new pattern. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and be well.